Interchange conference for the level of energy that it produces. So when the team suggested we come here to talk about the data action plan, I was actually really excited. You can see here from this storyboard that the context in which we as data and technology professionals are operating in transport is changing. Data is becoming an ever more important enabler for how we make decisions and plan and manage and operate our assets and our networks. But because of the complexity in the kind of public-private sector devolved nature of how we deliver transport, lots of that really important data is hidden away in many different organizations and sometimes siloed within bits of those organizations and therefore not realizing anywhere near its full potential. So we in the DFT feel that we want to find it and share it where possible and do research on it and analysis and use it to drive technology adoption, and in doing so can help us achieve our kind of departmental and our government aims. So the big question, I guess, of the day is, what's the department doing about it? Well, as you just heard, the department is going to be publishing a Transport Data Action Plan later on this month. And that has been developed with wide sector engagement and sets a really clear vision for how we want to realise that additional value from transport data. And I was hoping today that we were going to be able to talk to you about the very specific actions that we're committing to, but unfortunately our publication has been delayed, but we're going to spend a bit more time in conversation with Sarah instead. But you can see here that you can expect a veritable smorgasbord of actions across these 5 pillars that you will recognise from our 2023 strategy, but that are shaped as very tangible next steps and actions that we in the department want to take and that we need you out there in the transport sector to engage with as well. So you can see from the wording, it's not just about the what, but it's also about the how. We want to remove those barriers to access. We want to do some of that enabling work so that you guys don't have to. And we want to set expectations for how some of that stuff is done, where it's sensible to do so. And wherever you are in transport land, we want you to have the opportunity to learn from each other as well. But let me be clear, publishing this isn't the goal. I mean, we're very excited about publishing it, but it's just the beginning. It's the beginning of the journey where the department is really now recognizing transport data as an asset, as an enabler, and as an opportunity for our sector. So I'm hoping to be back here in 2 years' time and going to be saying to you that the context with which we are operating has changed. Data is now shared and a strategic asset that's underpinning how we plan and operate and improve our transport networks. And we've moved away from this world where data is hidden and siloed in organizations to an environment where data is fundamentally driving improved outcomes, and we are realizing its full potential. I've said that there's been lots of engagement in the development of our data strategy, and I wanted to thank you all for that. And I understand that we had a very engaged roundtable here yesterday as well. But as this is a journey, we want to keep that dialogue open. So we hope everyone will find something within the Transport Data Action Plan that they can associate with. But if there's things that you think that we should be doing that we're not doing, then do please continue to reach out and talk to us. Sarah.
Thank you so much, Sam. And it's a genuine delight to be back here in Manchester at the Interchange conference. As you heard from the introduction, I am now in a new guise, having previously been Chief Scientific Advisor for the Department for Transport, but I'm now a very proud Mancunian as Vice President and Dean of the Faculty of Science and Engineering at the University of Manchester. But I couldn't miss the opportunity of seeing all of my transport friends and actually making sure we've got that join up between the brilliant things that are emerging from fundamental science and engineering and the fantastic work that I know happens across the transport sector that we all hear about at Interchange. So the organisers very kindly gave me the opportunity to have a conversation with Sam partly reflecting on my time when I was Chief Scientific Advisor and hearing about things have developed in the few months since I left, particularly in the context of the Data Action Plan. But also, when we were in the Department for Transport, Sam and I were, I'm going to say, partners in crime, in that we saw the development from over 4 years ago when we first started working together using data to inform some of the advice we were giving around COVID, and saw the importance of data and the emergence and availability of data be completely transformed over that 4-year period that I was in the department. So we've come up with a few different themes that we're going to talk through, and we've not ever worked in this format before, so let's see how it works, and hopefully it's of interest to you. So the first thing, Sam, that we thought we'd talk about is data quality. Data is one of those things that I think when we're in conversations like this, people sort of nod and say, yes, data, terribly good idea, terribly important, must be something that transforms what we do. But we also know there's a risk of sort of garbage in, garbage out. So how do we make sure that the data we're using is of the right quality to help us do what you so eloquently talked about, find it, share it, and then use it to change behavior and transport use?
I guess it's important not to think of quality as a binary concept. I think what we're talking about when we talk about quality, and you'll have seen up there, we've got a pillar that looks at quality and standards, is kind of fitness for purpose. So is that data good enough to do the thing that you need to do with it? Is it accurate enough, timely enough to support the decision that you're making or to kind of underpin that deployment of technology? That's not to say that we don't have a really strong focus on quality, particularly on the kind of safety critical operations, but I think it's really important that we don't always let kind of perfect be the enemy of the good when it comes to thinking about data. So somebody said to us a couple of months ago is you guys get really stuck with when you're opening data, waiting until you've got these kind of really robust, repeatable pipelines to open it. But can you just consider putting a data set out there? Even if you can't back it up in future, think about how much value it is to us to see it first and be able to develop our systems in advance of you doing all your kind of background work. So that notion of let's not always chase perfect, but let's just make sure we're understanding the quality of that data for that particular purpose.
Yeah, so there's a few themes there, aren't there? So there's a bit about confidence in getting that balance between the speed with which we get data out there, but also, of course, making sure we are being responsible and paying attention to underpinning quality. There's something else, I think, around sort of transparency and making sure that we are communicating the data source, the data sort of veracity. Are there any ways in which we've been able to do that, do you think, that where we've been able to describe the source of our data and help people to understand where the data's from and therefore how confident they can be when they're then moving on and using it?
So I'd like to think we do that all the time with everything we publish. I think in the last few years, we're trying to be more and more transparent with everything that we're publishing. So if you look at the connectivity data, for example, that we published for the first time last year, that came with a big kind of methodology document. So it's not just about putting a new data source out there, it's about really explaining how we got to those numbers and how we, because it's all kind of calculated, so that not only is it repeatable, but people can understand the context, if you see what I mean, because that connectivity data set that looks at how connected everywhere is in the country to kind of businesses, services, etc., it has to be used in the context with which it was generated, if that makes sense. And so explaining, how we've derived it, what sources fed the modelling, I think were vitally important, as the risk is for a new data set like that, people might sort of take it and run with it, which is excellent, but fundamentally, if the data that's feeding it, isn't kind of updated in near real time, then we don't want anyone, trying to deploy it in near real time, for example.
And I think that's why that theme of user needs and communication is so important as well, because that's one of the tools that helps people understand the source. So one of the things we've talked about many times is the fact that there's always a bit of a challenge with data in that there's that moment of a data drop which is that single point in time. But data, as we saw so eloquently sort of demonstrated earlier, is transient. Data is always developing and always evolving. How do we make sure that after what I hope is the really positive response to the data action plan, that we keep the conversation going, we keep populating the data sources, but also we keep working to evolve our approach to using data? So how are we going to do that?
So I really want to tell you all the things that we're going to talk about, but the design of this data action plan, it's designed to be agile. So I alluded to it, it's kind of built on the same pillars as our strategy, but obviously a strategy is a kind of big vision direction of travel, whereas this is very outcomes and action oriented, deliberately, because we don't know what's coming. And if you think back to where we were kind of in 2022, 23, how much the world has changed technologically since then, we need to build a framework that is agile enough to respond to that. So the data action plan isn't everything that we think we're ever going to do on data ever. It is the next right steps that we think we've identified through that kind of wide engagement with the sector in order to get to the vision that we are trying to collectively get to, with a view that new things will turn up. We might try something that doesn't work, or we might have to adjust, or something will happen in the sector where you need us to step in and do something, as a convening body that we hadn't thought of. So the structure and the framework of this action plan is designed to be agile, and we say up front, this is a living document. This isn't the last thing you'll hear. This sets out the next things, and then we'll come back, and we'll come back again, and undoubtedly we'll be completely derailed by some other technology or world events or whatever it is, but either way we'll react to it. And that's why I said as well, we'll keep talking. This isn't a kind of one and done. You didn't get to feed in once and then we don't want to hear from you again. We recognise that we've got a very kind of limited view on the world, and we really value when people kind of tell us what they need us to do to enable them. So to give you an example, last year, year before, time flies, in our Digital Twins programme, we asked the sector what was the most useful thing we could do for them in order to enable the adoption of that technology. And the clear message we got back was, we need an economic benefits analysis that is robust, that is transport appraisal compliant, in order that we can garner the investment we need to be able to deploy this technology. And actually, we hadn't seen that from our point of view, but that's something we then went and did because you told us that was the single biggest thing of value we could do to support that programme. So that's why we want to keep that dialogue open, because we're a small player in a very big and complex ecosystem.
And I know from my time in government, some of the most helpful conversations I had were in settings like this, where we bring together those from industry, those from local government, those from academia, those from central government, because actually so much is changing in terms of the data that we've got available and the types of challenges that we're looking to address. I think something else I really observed was we mustn't underestimate the culture change that this is. Something I very much learned in my time in government was that the transport sector is used to single point investments in major pieces of capital infrastructure, and those are normally physical infrastructures. And so we are very, very used to the way of funding one-off single pieces of transport technology or transport system that then move into the process of being funded through maintenance and use. Data's not like that. I mean, first of all, we don't necessarily always have that big capital investment up the front, so that's good. But sometimes it's helpful to have things that actually are a big single investment because they have all sorts of things around them. But actually, that need to continually maintain and continually engage and evolve, in my view, actually requires quite a different way of looking at the financing and support of this type of technology. So I'm really interested in how that conversation is going to evolve in government, because it's playing out quite significantly in transport, but also in other parts of government, I think, as well. I think as I mentioned, I can't resist a plug for the University of Manchester and the importance really of partnership. One of the things that's been great since I've moved to the new role is seeing how effectively the university works with local authorities, with transport providers, with local industries. And you heard from Andy Burnham earlier around the exciting growth that we have within the region. What do you think is the most effective way that we can make sure we're working in partnership, especially recognising that it won't always be central government that either should or does have access to these data? So how do we make sure we've got that seamless partnership between academia, industry and the public sector when we are curating and utilising all of these data sources?
So I guess just to make sure I'm invited back in 2 years' time to do my future bit, it's conferences like this, I think, that build those networks and relationships. But kind of seriously though, we do recognise that we are, a bit player in a broader kind of solar system of operators. And it's all of those different types of people and organisations that come together that can enable us to do the kind of innovative stuff that we're doing on data now. So you mentioned academia. So academia can be more unconstrained and has the kind of deep methodological expertise to be able to push those kind of boundaries of research. And it's our responsibility to communicate with academia what are our evidence gaps and what are our priorities so that they can kind of direct, that research to stuff that will really make a difference. And that's why we have our areas of research interest and our evidence strategy, and we are always happy to support academics who are applying for funding to deliberately fill research gaps that we've communicated that we've got. But then you've got your SMEs as well, and your SMEs bring that kind of agility and creativity. And we have things like the Transport Research Innovation Grants that you know very well, and our Dragon's Den sessions that we had yesterday in the department, where a technology is new and perhaps less mature, we want to be able to put that kind of small bits of funding all over the place, hedging our bets to get those SMEs to the point that they've then got the evidence to garner, much bigger investment to be able to drive that technology through to adoption. So, academia is important. SMEs are important, and of course our big companies and our big kind of technical partners give us that kind of stability and the framework and the pace of change. And I was talking to colleagues here yesterday, and there is so much change happening out there, and we really struggle to keep up. But everybody plays their part. It can't just be us.
And again, having worn both hats, we cannot underestimate the value of the freedom that there is within small and medium-sized enterprises or academia or some local government groups that are doing brilliant things of just trying new things. That both Sam and I have worked very closely on innovation, and we really want to support that culture of innovation and that ability to sort of have the confidence to fail fast, but goodness me, try hard to do new things. So I've got just sort of two more themes that I wanted to sort of come through, and I think what I'm interested in is where you think the next big thing is. So one of the things in this area is everything's moving so fast. We saw the emergence of large language models really transform our approach to artificial intelligence a couple of years ago. I'm now seeing amazing potential coming through in quantum technologies that I think will transform the way we sense and are able to convene our transport systems in the next decade or so. It really is coming. What's the next big thing that's really exciting for you in your role?
I'm not going to pretend to know the answer to the futures bit, because that's not my kind of area of specialism. But one of the next big things for us in our team and in the department, is the digital twin technology. And the reason I say next big thing is because the technology is mature, the market's mature. There are really good examples across the world. It's now just about deploying it, and the challenge with deploying it, I make it sound really easy, is you're fundamentally changing or having to change the way a company would work, and workflows work from what people would manually do now to kind of building in this kind of twinning technology to operate that network, or whatever it is. But it's the next big thing because it can deliver value now. It's just about making sure we are doing what we need to do to kind of set the appropriate kind of regulatory guidelines, etc., but to be able to deploy it in a way that can make a difference as quickly as possible. And that's something we're going to be focusing on in the next few years.
Yeah, and it's such a challenge, isn't it? Because I think when we talk about things like digital twins, in a way, the technology is the easy bit. We have solved the vast majority of the challenges in creating an effective digital twin that can not just mimic a real-world system, but also enable us to anticipate and deliver real-time changes to that system. The big challenge is making sure that it sits within the organisational construct, and we saw this in so many different technologies where actually the temptation is to add in new technologies but not do that disruption of the way in which we're delivering our transport systems. So I think that's something that we really need to make sure we're continuing to work through to understand how we can responsibly disrupt the way we're delivering our transport systems to really get the advantage of these technologies. So the last thing, I just wanted to give you the opportunity, Sam. When I was Chief Scientific Advisor, I always used the Interchange conference as a bit of an opportunity as a call for action. Visitors were always very gracious, and I'd discover what my call for action had been when I read the LinkedIn post later on in the day. If you had the opportunity, which you do, to have a bit of a call to action for the people who are kindly listening to this conversation now, what would it be?
That is a great question. I guess wherever you are in the transport sector, and whatever role you do, when you're thinking about data, I would love for you not to think of data as something that you own, but to think of yourselves as custodians of data, where you want to look at how you can make more value out of that data, how you can share that data, what value it would have to somebody else as part of your ecosystem. So fundamentally changing the way that our organisations think about the data that they generate as a byproduct of their activities, to make sure that collectively we are all on that kind of same journey to sharing more where possible and achieving the vision, I guess, that we're setting out in the Transport Data Action Plan.
Yeah, so that's a brilliant sort of point to close on. Our role as custodians of data as part of the collective endeavour, which we're all very committed to make transport better, more effective for the UK and for society. So thanks a lot, Sam. That was absolutely brilliant. And thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Thanks.